Hi, my name's Chaz and you're watching Chaz's Languages. In this video, you'll learn the accusative and genitive singular cases, consonant gradation, and word types and endings in Finnish. Hi you guys, thank you for watching and welcome to the third Finnish lesson. Today we'll talk about consonant gradation, the genitive and accusative singular cases, and word types and endings. First, I'd like to start off with consonant gradation. Now in Finnish there are 15 noun cases, and in the singular and plural, which actually makes 30 different forms. And with most of them, nouns change at the end. In a little bit, I'll talk about noun types and endings and how they relate to the cases. But I want to cover consonant gradation first because it applies not only to nouns, but also to adjectives and verbs. Now, when certain consonant or consonant combinations occur in a word, they change when used in one of the 15 cases based on the rules of consonant gradation. So here are the basics of consonant gradation, and then in the next Finnish lesson, I'll cover this topic more in depth. So the following are called the weak grade consonant gradation in Finnish, and that's because it's going from the strong grade to a weak grade consonant. So the first of these is words that have PP in the stem change to just a singular P whenever one of the cases is applied based on consonant gradation. So for example, for the word kauppa, which has two P's in it, according to the rules of consonant gradation, you drop out one of the P's and it becomes kauppa, and then you add the appropriate case ending. And I know it may be hard to distinguish that difference between kauppa and kaupa, but there's just a subtle difference, and once you study Finnish and get more used to pronouncing all the letters, because in Finnish you have to pronounce every single letter in a word, and if there's a double letter you actually have to pronounce that double letter out. Unlike in English where some double letters are just pronounced as a singular letter, in Finnish you actually have to pronounce them out. And once you get more used to that, then you'll recognize that there is a difference between words that have a double consonant and words that don't. And the second weak consonant gradation change is a double T to a singular T. So for example, with the word kortti, which means card, one of the T's drops out and becomes kortti, and then you add the appropriate case ending. Next consonant gradation change is a double K to a K. And this occurs, for example, in the word kukka, which means flower. So you drop off one of the K's and it becomes kukka, and then you add the appropriate case ending. And then the next one is where a P changes to a V. So for example, this occurs in the word apu, which means help. And the P changes to a V in this word, so it would become avu, and then you add the appropriate case ending. The next consonant gradation change is where a T changes to a D. So for the word, for example, katu, which means street, it would become kadu, and then you add the appropriate case ending. And then the next consonant gradation change is where a K drops out of a word. Now this one can be a little bit complicated and maybe confusing, so I'm just going to kind of cover it real quickly. In the next video, I'll probably cover it more in depth just because it needs a little bit more explanation. And I'd rather talk about that more in depth whenever I talk about consonant gradation more in depth in the next video. And so this change occurs with the verb lukea, which means to read. And if we want to conjugate it for the U form, it becomes sinä luet. And as you'll notice there, the K drops out of the middle. And then this next group of consonant gradation changes consist of two different consonants. So for the first one, it's a change where NK changes to NG. So for example, with the word sanku, which means bed, it changes to sangu, and then you add the case ending. The next consonant gradation change is an NT to a double N. So for example, with the word englanti, which means England, before you add the case ending, you change it to englanni. And then the next consonant gradation change is LT to double L. So for example, with the word silta, which means bridge, you change it to silla before you add the appropriate case ending. And then the next change is for RT to RR. So for example, with the verb piirtää, which means to draw, if we want to conjugate it for the we form, we would say me piirrämme. And the last consonant gradation of this type is an MP to an MM. So for example, with the word kampa, which means comb, you would change it to kamma, and then you add the appropriate case ending. And next I'd like to talk about the different word types and their endings. These are called nominal stems. There are several nominal stem types in Finnish, actually over 40. But don't worry, they're actually easier to learn than you think. In this video, I'll cover some of the nominal stem types, and then in the next Finnish lesson video, I'll cover this more in depth. Now, the first noun type I'll talk about are nouns that end in an I, which change to an E in the end whenever the cases are applied to them. This only applies to a certain group of nouns. They're usually Old Finnish nouns that end in I, and so this can be a little bit difficult to learn and can be kind of tricky to decide whether the I changes to an E or not before the case is added. But as you study Finnish and learn more words of this type, it becomes easier to recognize them, and it becomes easier to learn and do. So the first example of a word of this type is the word kivi. So before you add a case ending, the I changes to an E. So in the partitive, it would become kiveä. And then in the genitive, it would become kiven. Another noun of this type is the word nimi. And for the partitive, it becomes nimeä. And for the genitive, it becomes nimen. So as you can see, in both of these nouns, the I changes to an E before adding the case ending. And then the next noun type are nouns that end in nen. Now this is a very common noun type because all nationalities end in this noun stem type, and also several common nouns end in this stem type. So for nouns of this group, in the partitive, the nen changes to an sta, and then for other cases, the nen changes to se, and then you add the appropriate case ending. So for example, with the word mehiläinen, which means bumblebee, it changes to mehiläistä in the partitive, and for all other cases, mehiläise, and then you add the appropriate case ending. And then the next nominal stem type are nouns that end in r. For nouns of this type, for the partitive, you add ta at the end. And then for all other cases, you add an e at the end before adding the appropriate case. So for example, for the noun sisar, which means sister, it becomes sisarta in the partitive. And then for all other cases, it becomes sisara plus the appropriate case ending. And as you can see, that E is inserted in there before the appropriate case ending. And then for nouns ending in SI, the SI becomes TTA in the partitive, and then becomes DE for all the other noun cases before you add the appropriate noun case ending. So for example, with the word käsi, which means hand, in the partitive, it becomes kättä, and then in the genitive, it becomes käden. And the next nominal stem type are words that end in the letter E. So in the partitive, you add TTA to the end of these words. And then for all the other noun cases, you add an extra E before you add the appropriate case ending. So for example, with the word huone, in the partitive, it becomes huonetta. And then in the genitive, it becomes huonen. And as you can see there in the genitive, that E was doubled before adding the N for the genitive ending. And then the final nominal stem type I'll talk about in this video are nouns that end in AT. So in the partitive, the ending becomes ATTA. And then all other cases, you drop off the T and add an extra A and then the appropriate case ending. So for example, with the word kevät, which means spring, in the partitive, it becomes kevättä. And then in the genitive, it becomes kevään. So that's a basic overview of the nominal stem types in Finnish. Now I know those two cases I talked about while talking about the different nominal stem types, the partitive case and the genitive case, are unfamiliar right now, but I'll cover the partitive in a future Finnish lesson, and then I'm actually about to cover the genitive so that you'll know how to form those different noun cases. So lastly in the video, I'll go over the accusative and genitive singular cases. And the reason I'm lumping these two cases together is because they look exactly the same. And they have the same ending on words, which is the letter N. The accusative case is used when a noun or adjective is put in the object place of a sentence or the accusative place of a sentence. In English, this only applies to personal pronouns, but in Finnish, this applies to not only all nouns, but also adjectives as well. And then the genitive case is used to show possession. The accusative case and the genitive case ending, as I said earlier, is the letter N, except for the personal pronouns, where the accusative singular ending for them is the letter T. So the personal pronouns in the accusative are minä becomes minut, sinä becomes sinut, hän becomes hänet, se becomes sen, and it's the only personal pronoun that gets an N added to the end, and this is because it applies to objects and things. And then me becomes meidät, te becomes teidät, he becomes heidät. And then ne actually stays the same in the accusative. And it's the only personal pronoun that doesn't change in the accusative. So let's look at a couple of examples where the personal pronouns are used in sentences as the accusative. So for the pronoun se in the accusative, for example, with the sentence luetko sin, as you'll see, it gets an n added to the end because here it's used in the accusative. And luetko sin means, are you reading it? And then for the pronoun he, which means they, used in this sentence mina nan hedat, which means I see them, he becomes hedat because it's used in the accusative place in the sentence. And then the genitive of the personal pronouns is actually the same as the possessive pronouns, which I covered in the last video. So I won't go over them again, but I will give just a few examples just to kind of refresh that a little bit. And as a reminder, the genitive case shows possession. So for example, with the pronoun mina, it becomes minun. So if you wanted to say my name, you would say minun nimi. And the pronoun me becomes medan. So if you wanted to say our phone call, you would say medan puhelu. And again, I already covered the possessive pronouns in the last video, so just for time's sake, I'm not going to cover that again. But that was just a little bit of an example, just to kind of refresh your memory on that. And now for the accusative and genitive singular cases of adjectives and all other nouns, which the ending for both of these cases, as a reminder, is the letter N. So for example, with the noun koira, which means dog, in the accusative, it becomes koiran. For example, when it's used in this sentence, I want a dog, it becomes haluan koiran. The N is added there to the end of it because it's used in the accusative. And then in the genitive, it becomes also koiran. And for example, if you wanted to say the dog's toy, you would say koiran lelu. And see there, it also has the N ending to show possession because you're saying the dog's toy. And the next example is with the noun kuka. And this is one of the nouns that I talked about earlier, which consonant gradation applies to because it has a double K that changes to a singular K before the appropriate case ending is added. So for example, in the accusative, it becomes kukan. So if you say, you buy a flower, you would say ostat kukan. So as you see there, that second K is dropped off and then an N is added to the end because it's used in the accusative place in the sentence. In the genitive, it becomes also kukan. And if you wanted to say, for example, the flowers smell, you would say kukan toksu. And again, that extra K is dropped off and then an N is added for the genitive to show possession because you're saying the flowers smell. And then for the next example, we'll use the noun mehilainen, which means bumblebee. And this noun belongs in one of the nominal stem types that we talked about earlier, which are nouns that end in nen. And they change from nen to se and then add the appropriate case ending. So in the accusative, mehilainen becomes mehilaisen. And for example, in the sentence, he met the bee, you would say hän tapasi mehilaisen. And as you see there, the nen changes to se and then the n is added for the accusative case. And then the genitive mehilainen becomes also mehilaisen. And if you wanted to say, for example, the bee's flower, then you take the nen ending, change it to se, and then add the n for the genitive. And altogether that becomes mehilaisen kuka, the bee's flower. And then for the last example, I'll use the noun huone, which means room. So this noun belongs in one of the nominal stem types that I mentioned earlier, where they end in an e and they get an extra e added before the appropriate case ending is applied to the noun. So in the accusative, the noun becomes huonen. And used in a sentence, for example, if you wanted to say, we need a room, you would say, tarvitsemme huoneen. And as you'll see there, the e is doubled and then the n is added for the accusative case ending. And then for the genitive, it also is huoneen. And if you wanted to say, for example, the room's window, you would say huoneen ikuna. And as you'll see there, again, the e is doubled and then an n is added for the genitive to show possession. Well, you guys, that's it for today's Finnish lesson. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to give it a like if you did. Like the Facebook page and follow the Twitter page for channel updates, notifications, as well as more language learning tips and advice. And also don't forget to subscribe for more language learning videos. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.